All right. I think I'm live. Nate, if you're watching, can you tell me if you can see me and hear me? Let me see here. There. All right. This is a real stretch for me, folks, but here I am on live on YouTube on Grail Country, and there is a link that you can click on and join me, and we can talk about, whatever it is that you would like to talk about. This is your chance to talk to a Grail Country person. So I think, yeah. So I'm trying this for the very first time. I'm actually not sure what I want to talk about. I was having a visit with someone who said that they would join me here. So we'll see. See if he makes it. Oh yeah, okay, Lance, you can see and hear me, right? I didn't really plan to talk about anything. But I was speaking to someone previously, and they said something that I thought was really interesting. They said, and this is not a quote from them, but it's light is the music that we cannot hear, and music is the light that we cannot see. And that kind of launched us into a little bit of a discussion about what it would mean to be able to hear the music behind the light, or see the light behind the music. So if anyone wants to jump in and talk about that strange topic with me, that would be great. Yeah. There we go.
Surprise.
You're in.
I think it's working.
Yeah. There we go. Can those who are watching, can you guys hear Tyler? Because I don't know exactly what I'm doing here. Maybe give me a thumbs up. Oh, there's Lance. Oh, Lance.
I just wanted to support you.
Thank you. So can you hear Tyler?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome.
I think this is working. Looks good.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay, so we were talking about light is the music that we cannot hear, and music is the light that we cannot see. And we started talking about synesthesia, how people have that wonderful gift. And Tyler informed me that there are artificial ways to acquire that gift. But I wondered if we could, how.
Wait. Hold on. Hold on.
Okay.
All right, I get your point. So I think so. We do want to explore how it is that we might understand the idea of synesthesia in the first place.
Yeah.
But when you say the word artificial,
Ooh.
yeah. So I did say LSD. I'll point that out. That I made an offhand joke about LSD allowing you to. Now this is very famously described by the first experience with LSD, that he had a synesthetic experience, and that's what kind of clued him into it being a strange compound. But there are natural substances. So if you are prone to, I think there might be an echo in the microphone. Do
Is
you
it me?
have, Lance, do you have the stream open still?
I don't think so.
Is
I
it
don't.
me?
But I do have outside speakers. I don't have headphones.
Okay. Well, it's not terrible, but
Okay. I'll turn it down a little bit.
okay. So then this is an interesting debate within much of mystical religious experience. What is the role of the hallucinatory? What is the role of natural compounds? So there are plenty of substances that, you know, God created rather than man-made stuff like LSD, which in some sense, even though it was synthesized by a man, only functions because there are parts of the brain designed to receive it, right? So it
Yeah,
mimicked
right.
chemicals that were already created in the environment that we, for whatever reason, have some deep relationship to. And I don't just mean like historically people ingesting weird substances. I mean, mushrooms and fungus are necessary for all of life to exist. They're necessary to exist. So there's anytime I ever see something that seems absolutely necessary, that seems profound to me. It's like,
Yeah.
there's not a minor piece here.
Yeah.
All right, so I didn't mean to launch into that too deeply necessarily, but this idea of what it is for one thing to transform into another. Can we say it that way?
Yes. That's a good
So
way to say it.
yeah, it's just for one thing to transform into another. How does that even happen? Where does that happen? Why does
Right.
that happen?
Right.
So we have things like chemical transformations. So if I ingest a substance, it then goes into my brain and it aligns with its little tiny electric fields and some other little receptor, and then things lock into place. And somehow that radically alters how I perceive reality. Uh, is that already happening? Like, isn't that already happening?
Well, so is what you're saying that the ability for that to happen, it pre-exists, right?
Yeah. So what we're doing is like when when I hear a sound with my eyes closed, with this bottle falling on the table here, I see bottle,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an experience like that? Where I
Well,
like it invokes a visual image of bottle, like there's like
yeah, if you recognize the sound of if you've already heard the sound of a falling bottle and seen it, no?
right, yeah, like, well, that's why I'm choosing something I'm familiar with, yeah.
Right.
But if
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with it, I do kind of search, right? I do this like visual search. It like images
Yes.
start to populate in my head. So there's like a deep relationship between that. And so this quote that you have there is from a very interesting character, Robert Edward Grant, who just recently showed up on the Aubrey Marcus podcast. Strangely enough, I don't know
Oh,
if you know.
really?
Yeah, very odd. I was blown out of the water because prior to that, he's part of this very strange think tank, which is like a collection of quacks. We could almost call it a gaggle instead of a think tank. But it's a beautiful scam in a lot of ways. But I mean, because it speaks about truth in a lot of things, but it also, you're buying crystals that are enhanced by like super resonators, and who knows what's going on there. But look, placebo is powerful. Okay, it's like
It is.
belief is powerful. That's all you need to begin with.
Yeah.
So there's anyhow, this guy is associated with this Nassim Harriman. If you know this guy, who's interesting character who floats around. But so he said that light is the music that we cannot hear, and music is a light we cannot see. So there's this immediate separation between the visual field, which is limited, and I think McLuhan talks about this too, and the auditory field, which is seemingly like infinite. There's a strangeness to the character of these like dimensions of experience, and one can't be the other, and yet they attend to each other.
Yeah.
So then there's this question of what is pressure?
Pressure?
Yeah, because touch, right? We're talking about senses, synesthesia. So what are our senses is essentially like the little exploration we kind of have to make, but an understanding of what it is I'm touching myself right now. I feel it.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is actually quite fascinating to me because my whole what do you call it? Obsession with the body problem has to do with the senses, right? Because we have this body, and we talked about this before we went live here, Tyler. We were talking about things that hurt and things that make us feel uncomfortable or whatever,
that fail on us from time to time.
Fail on us, and that's because we live inside of our bodies. I don't know. I'm not going to be able to say this right. Okay, so let me change direction a little tiny bit. William Blake has this wonderful painting of an adult with a child on his shoulders, and the child is happy, right? And I started thinking about that child as my body, because there's something childlike about my body. My body is not, what is it? It's not, it's living in the moment, right? Which is what children do. And so it's only being in the moment. It's experience. Its reality is what's happening to it right now. So like I recently had something happen to me that my body had never experienced before. And so my body didn't know what was happening to me. And it acted naively, in the sense that it acted as if this thing was no danger to it at all, when in reality it was, right? Anyway, I don't know if that really
Did it.
Yeah, that's
did all the subtle things that you did with your body, in fact, prolong your capacity in such a way that you were able to get to the point where you could recuperate.
Yeah.
It's so hard to say, especially really, like when you look at the minute things that keep this whole thing running.
Yeah. Wow. And that's actually one of the thoughts I had was, okay, but my body did do certain things that it had never done before, because it knew that it had to do those things to preserve itself. And maybe I need to, like, how do I strengthen the bond between this thinking thing and this sensory thing, right? So that because I think it boils down to trust. Like, do we actually trust either one of these capacities? Like, does the body trust the mind, and does the mind trust the body? And how much is the body speaking to the mind without the mind realizing it? It's super intertwined.
Yeah. All right. So this is where,
and on a simple level, this is your body question, Sherry, too, which is interesting. But you're talking about the sense of perception. Is that part of the mindfulness? Like, one of the things my sponsors tells me is be where your feet are at. Like, your body positions you in a present moment. My mind races in the past, into the future, but this is this thing that centers me in the now, like the only thing that exists.
Right.
But then so one of the things you do is like wiggle your toes and feel your feet and feel your connectedness to the ground, like this sensation, like center yourself in this moment.
Right.
but that's that sensation. And so part of the thing is why I hear you guys talking about these things is in this mindfulness and getting yourself into the present now, and then being in tune to it, whether you're talking about the auditory, right, or the touch or these things, like this body gives us that capability to live as you talk about, Sherry, right, which isn't that thing. So anyway, that was very simplistic, but as you were talking about that,
No, that's good.
there's an importance to our bodies, right?
Yeah, like when you were talking about wiggling your toes and feeling where you're standing, I was thinking, yeah, that's giving the child the opportunity to speak, right? The child that's on your shoulders, the child that is your sensory body in a way, is paying attention to it, you know. Anyway, what were you going to say, Tyler?
So I do characterize things like this. They take on a character.
Yeah.
So for me, I like what Lance just said about now. So now is like this weird slice that's sandwiched between memory and possibility, right? So for me, the body feels like it's like the body as I have it now, this now is that thing which is sandwiched between memory and possibility. And for me, that feels like the feminine and the masculine split. I've always associated the feminine with the deep memory, like Mother Earth. It's like the bottom that things grow up out of, and then and it's growing up out of into something, towards something. And that towards something is the active movement forward through time, which is that forward thing. I don't know, whatever it is that we aim at, right? We make our focal point. We aim at it. Oh, look.
This is Chad.
Oh, I know Chad. And I know his mask. I know his mask well.
Good to see you, Tyler. Sorry to drop in.
It's good to see your mask. I've got a hoodie too. Hold on.
We're doing the incognito.
But is it cold there?
Yeah, it's coming near the season of winter, but no, I wouldn't call it cold.
No, you have no idea what cold is.
Yeah, I'm in Florida. Yeah, so anyone north of the Mason-Dixon line. Hey, I like Florida. You guys can come visit. It's not bad.
I worked there once.
Yeah,
I could think of worse places to be.
apparently we're the only place in the country where anyone is happy with the Republicans right now. So if you want to lean into the conservative stuff, this might be one of the hot spots with Texas. That's what it's like it's shaping up.
Yeah.
Okay. Before I lose that thread from before, real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, so we come into this world, and we're sitting on top of a body that we don't know anything about. We have to learn about it. Like, we have to experience it, and we have to learn about the world. And we learn about the world through these senses. It's the senses that begin to tell us the shape of what it is that we're in, right? And it tells us about ourselves too, because we seem to be made of the same stuff that the world is made of. And so that it seems to settle into, for the most of us, with the organs that we have, are these five senses. And we seem to use them all to, well, it's just to describe reality. Like, it's to understand what's out there. And we use them also, like, as a baby, you grab things that you see first, you reach out and you touch, and then you actually bring it to your mouth and you like touch it with your mouth and like put it all inside. And because you have a lot of sense organs, it's so many nerve endings, it's where
well, we literally call that all sense making.
Yes, exactly. Sense making, exactly. And we just do this all the time, making impressions of the world, being impressed upon by the world.
Right.
And sometimes the world sucks, like, really badly. Sometimes it hurts you, like it stings, and you recoil from it. Like, you literally turn away, right? And you hide yourself from it. And you you want it to not exist in the world. You want it to go away. And I think, okay, so imagine you see a bunch of things in the world that you don't want to see. Does that mean you turn away from vision, like towards hearing more? Or imagine you hear a bunch of things, like the sound of anger in the house all the time. Does that cause you to like move away from sound towards vision? I'm being really curious about how it is we preference and why it is we preference how we look at the world. Like,
What if instead of turning away, we fill that field, that sense, you know, like in the case of seeing, it would be the field of vision. We fill it with something more wonderful, right? So like if you see something that is painful or ugly or whatever, then you tend towards something that is more beautiful. I mean, that could literally be.
yeah, but sometimes we perpetuate it too, right? I mean,
Yeah,
sometimes
that's
we
true.
get caught by it as a pattern and we just find ourselves, I mean, without even realizing it, I find myself being very similar to my parents. And I can't explain that. Like, I hated some of the stuff they did. It's so stupid. Why would I do that too? Dumb. But I'm able to catch it. So I'm able to catch it after it happens, or like while it's happening, and be like, okay, Tyler, come on, man. Just slow it down a little bit.
Yeah.
And that slowing it down a little bit is really fascinating. Because what it does, what it seems to do is like return me to memory. It's a remembrance. It's like remembering what matters, what really matters. It's not this immediacy thing. It's like, no, this little thing right here, right now, this has to be taken care of right now. This is it. We're drawing the lines. This is the hill we're dying on. This is the battle. And that's never the case. It's like literally never the case. It's so stupid. And if I can just slow down a little bit, there's I don't know. That's just kind of a side point. I don't know exactly how much of the exploration of the synesthesia topic you want to do, or like what aspect of the senses, because one of the things that I really want to know about is since we use our senses to trust the state of the world, what happens when you can't trust your senses? And this is what I think the true danger is underlying psychedelics, is because it questions the validity of your senses. And the moment you do that, like, that's the greatest possible opening that you can do, period. Like that concept, once it exists within you, it's completely, well, what I would say is that you bump up against the absolute.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And this is a thing that you can't avoid if you do certain studies, or if you are just exposed to certain experiences in the world, perhaps. But in ordinary experience, it seems that we are prepared by degrees to at some point confront the absolute. Maybe in our wizened state with a long beard, or gray hair if we can't grow a beard. There's that, but somewhere later in life we're bumped up against this when we're prepared for it. But you can take a substance at the age of 13 and you got nothing, right? It's just
What were you thinking to say there, Chad, before?
Well, what's I've thought a lot about these senses a lot, because I think it's, to me, when I think about the sight, taste, touch, smell, and hearing, I feel like that's something about that seems very reductionist. And like there's sometimes I think memory is a sense of sorts. I know that some people would say, well, no, that's memory, but it's interesting because I think senses, like in the way that we're talking about, like touch, sight, taste, smell, hearing, sight, all that stuff. And when all that is embodied, I think some memory is a type of sense. But then you said like when something happens and then I say no and I want to turn my head, what is the thing that says no? Is that a sense? You know, 'cause like I have an inner dialogue and I actually think in I think words. And so I was thinking about that. And I also am like you, where I get like these reactions, like I act like my mother or my father in these ways, and never in the best ways. It's always in like the ways that are most undesirable. And then also in what you were saying, I was thinking about when somebody does something funny, and I have this involuntary reaction of a laugh, and that's, I think, tied to some of that too. Like is so there's just a lot of that I was talking about. I didn't pick up on a lot of the other earlier stuff, so I'm only hitting on your talk about the senses and stuff like that.
Well, I like that question that you asked, Chad, about what is the me that's turning away, right? What is that thing?
Well, literally, it's like I hear something, because like I can be in a situation and be agitated by something to the point where I can start to sense myself wanting to react, and then there's a voice in my head that says, "Don't do it. This isn't right. Just stop. Walk away. You know what you're doing." And then as I'm moving forward, closer and closer to reacting, this other parallel voice is like, "Come on, dude. Is it really that important?" And then this other voice is saying, "Yeah, dude. Like totally." Screw this dude. And so like there's an inner dialogue going on in there, and I think about that sometimes. And is that innate? Is that did our senses with the physical material world over time give God a voice in my mind?
Yeah, KRG1 would say absolutely. I don't know. Yeah, that's the voice of God in our mind, right? Like, what is that voice in your mind? I don't know if you know his speeches, but they're absolutely great. KRS1, I always mix these letters up.
Oh yeah.
There's he was probably MK Ultra 2 Sherry to make a callback.
Did we give him the voice that he gave to us?
Okay, well, I would say, so this is what it seems like to me. Because we're talking about behavior, right? Because we're talking about what it is to do at all, period. There's a question of yes or no. Should I or shouldn't I? That is the set of questions that we're engaged in. Should I or shouldn't I? So you can have a conception of what to do, and then you can say yes to that, or you can say no to that. So at the very least, there are two parts within you, and we can call them hemispherical, but it's not precisely delineated that way. In some way, you could think of it, there's a little bit in each one, rather yin-yang-esque. There's a little yes in every no and a little no in every yes, but there's a part of you who is always saying yes and hates the idea of no. And there's a part of you that's always saying no and hates the idea of yes.
Well, okay, let me ask this then. Is this, from a Christian point of view, aren't we talking about the passions?
Yeah, well, it's like if you take oil and water together and try to mix them together, it's two substances, but the complexities of the way in which those two things don't necessarily mix but do mix is kind of like what we experience as the passions within the senses. It's that constant tension between wanting to ultimately say yes and ultimately say no. Right? You're constantly being fed by some inner desire which says, move towards something, look more at that thing, which is the ingestion of light, right? It's all about ingestion. You're ingesting. And then you have to figure out what to do with that ingestion, right? It's what do you do with that? So that's where you get things like, it's not what you bring into your mouth that corrupts you. It's what comes out of it. Right? And that is the question. What do you do with the energy that you are feeding on? because plenty of people can feed on enormous amounts of negative energy and transmute it into good, and other people are just washed out by it.
Okay, well, Nate's reminding me that it's the friction of the yes and no that Valentine Tomberg talks about in Meditations on the Tarot, and I should have known that, but I'm so nervous in this live chat, I can't think.
Well, and you said something really interesting, Tyler, when you said when you catch yourself being, your parents, and you remind yourself to slow down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the other thing, the way I felt is like when I have to feel my toes and try and get myself present, I'm generally sped up. When I find myself behaving in ways that I would later regret, I'm sped up. There's this sense that you try and get to, we know there's stillness, right? Be still and know that I'm God. And we're talking about sensing and trying to then be able to defer those things. Like as soon as you said that slowness piece, and again, I fight with bipolar, so I can tend towards a mania, right?
Yep.
And when I get to that place, I get impulsive and my yes and my no's don't line up to where my true self wants to be.
Yep.
And there's something about trying to get yourself to a place of stillness and slowness where then you're properly handling the senses too. And maybe when you should be listening to something, you're hearing what you should hear, you're seeing what you should see, you're smelling, you see what I'm saying? There's something about that that's interesting.
Well, it's super interesting. It's and hello to all the lovely people in chat. I don't see a chat anywhere.
I think you can access it somewhere.
Go more.
It's just.
And I used to
popping up in
ingest
bubbles.
drugs that would take me to that stillness place because I couldn't slow myself down.
Oh, okay, right. So this is perfect. That's beautiful, because I think what happens is you see people cluster around drugs of preference, and that's exactly what you're looking at. You're looking at some kind of adaptive strategy where they are recognizing something about that processing speed needing to be adjusted somehow. So they're feeling some lack, and they're trying to fill that lack, like in the framing of it in general with the substance. And it never works because the substance itself, once you're able to elicit it via the substance, is no longer coupled to the action that's supposed to be producing it in the first place. Right. So it just runs out of control. Right. There's
pretty elusive, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
and you just there was something. Okay. Okay. The slowing down. So what the slowing down is, what it seems like to me is in some ways what we're talking about is the conscious state itself. Like that seems to be what awareness is. It's about this weird tension between yes and no.
Yeah.
And so what we do as conscious creatures, what will seems to be composed of, is leaning into one or the other side. It's very much like it's like surfing a wave, like you can smash right into a wave, or you can kind of catch it and ride it. And so there's a lot of already existing motion in the world. It's already happening. It's like the movement of the wave is constantly in motion, and I'm coming into it, and I can fight the wave. I can say no, in which case it's very chaotic. Or I can learn to move with the wave. I can learn to move with the already present motion. Or I can build enormously elaborate mechanical devices to capture the motion of the waves and transform it into electrical energy and then power homes and whole countries. Like there's enormous complexities in the ways that I can like go with the motions around me to redirect them towards my own aims, towards and here's the question, like, well, how do you direct those energies? And it seems to be something like a recognition of the whole. And that recognition of the whole gets more and more difficult to attune because the energies that are present are so strong. It doesn't matter how much you and I are aware of the problems in politics, for instance. There's nothing that you and I energetically could do of ourselves. We'd have to amount an enormous amount of like political energy in the system to oppose it, to change its state. So what that stillness is doing, rather than what you're seeing in politics, for instance, which is like exacerbating, and in bipolar, by the way, right? You find the extremes, you just go out to the extremes. Rather, you just bring it back to the center. because at the center is the least amount of energy that you need to lean into one or the other. And if you're talking about otherwise, what you're talking about needing to do is pull back from that which already is into some other direction, which it could be. And that requires force, requires effort, energy. So you want to bring it all the way back down to like the minimum amount.
What was coming to mind was that I don't know where it is in the Bible, but I hear Vanderglail say it once in a while. He'll say that God has placed eternity in our hearts. And that's what was coming to mind, because like I was thinking about like in that way, like you said, there's always this succession of yes and no's, and yes and no are both tied to, for me, in many ways, if I'm not kind of paying attention, they're either tied to something in the past or some fear of the future. And in that way, that's how eternity is placed in my heart. I'm always like, and so like when you're saying, if you can slow down and get stillness, you can really get in tune with the eternity in your heart. Then you can actually maybe navigate a little smoother in some sense. I don't know.
Yeah, well, so yeah, but like your own particular case is different because you're aware of the extremes. So, you know, like once you become aware of how extreme a thing can be, your memory of that gives you enormous birth, right? It's like, and this is the burden that you carry once you've gone that far, right, in life. This is why you can say something like, "I'm always an addict," something like that. It's like, you just you have memory. There it is, and so like, depending on where you are in life, how long you've been in a successful strategy, you'll call yourself different things. So if you want to say yes to memory, right, which is, in other words, you want the future to look like the past, you call yourself a conservative, right? So you say no to the future changing and yes to holding on to memory, and that's conservation. And if you want to say yes to the future that has nothing to do with the past, right, it's like literally decapitated from that which once was, then you're a progressive, right? You would just, all you care is that it's antithetical to the past. It doesn't have, in fact, the less connection to a lineage, the better. So there's this really interesting, whatever it is that needs to take shape is some interweaving of that yes and no that doesn't decapitate it, so that every new generation, every new participant, every new person that wants to come in and ride a wave doesn't find themselves clobbered, right, the moment they come in. And that's what's going on right now. It seems like across the world is like you've got, I'll just stick with the surfer analogy. You've got like little kids who've never ridden a board before being thrown into like 50-foot waves and saying, "Hey, figure it out. Hang 10, dude." It's not happening. Like you throw a new kid into this world and you're asking them to navigate enormously complex systems, stimuli, marketing, mind control everywhere, all the time. It's wild. So let me just land on this. Our ability to control our senses personally, to be aware of them, to know how they're hijacked, to know how they're being utilized, to be able to appropriately say yes or no, like that's the whole game in the age of information, in the age of social media, in the age of constant imagistic bombardment.
Do you think it's only a modern problem though? Like I personally think that
when in the, I mean, I take that one part of your point is absolutely true. It's always recurring, right? It's like perennial. But when before has a person been bombarded by like your porn experience, right? The sudden what was you guys, yeah, there's something which is,
just so people know, someone bombed a live chat and then put some porn on that people weren't expecting of. Sherry's not watching porn on a regular basis. Just clarify for the crowd.
It's all about context matters. But look, we're supposed to forgive you, Sherry, no matter what. Like
he's like, remember your porn experience? And I'm like, yep. Okay, go.
Well,
all right, I'm glad we cleaned that up.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think that's happening right now, Mathieu Pajot talked about consuming things too quickly, and he was talking about the foreigner or whatever, but he sees this pattern.
Yeah.
And right now in humanity, there's this new thing happening to us out of these screens that is hitting us with so many new things in these senses that we aren't able to touch base with. And one of the things I wanted to get out, you talked about wiring, right? How we're wired to have things. And we did this. One of the things I've noticed is since I started using a prayer rope, two things. One of the things when I used to use drugs is, one, I wanted to slow myself down. Two, I wanted to cut off the memories, the feelings, the things that were happening. It was an escape, right? And one of the things I started using the Jesus prayer, but one of the things I realized, this silly little rope, is as soon as I put this in my hand, it starts getting me into, oh, we're going into stillness. Even if my mind's sped up or I'm having a problem, this tactile thing starts almost a rewiring in me, say, oh, it's time for us to go to this place. And so I had this moment where I had a very close family friend that I'd worked with for quite some time, and they suddenly died, and it really hit me. And I had that sense of the heaviness when your thoughts explode, your stomach's sick, your heart's racing. And the first thing I did is I reached out to Chad and talked to him about it. And then the second thing is I sat down and I grabbed this silly little thing and I started to work my way through. I started doing a Jesus prayer, but there was something about that. And within literally a matter of a minute, all those feelings, when people know when those moments happen in life, those things dissipated from me literally in a minute. And I think there's some rewiring we can do to ourselves through some things that can help us to do that. And they're subconscious. Like, I didn't know that's happening. I just put in the work, like it's like learning how to play scales or whatever. And then you can play music. You aren't thinking about it. And so I think there are some things we can do to rewire ourselves to where we can get ourselves into stillness pretty quickly.
Yeah, it sounds like embodying contentment rather than consuming content.
That's nice. That's very good. Yeah. You know, about, like, I have a little prayer rope too. And one of the things that really surprised me when I started using it was that when I take it in my hand, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to express this properly, but sometimes it feels like, you remember Men in Black, the movie Men in Black? And that guy dies, and then they open up his head and there's a little guy in there driving him. Remember? Well, that's me. Okay. Like, that's me. That's what it feels like. And so that little guy suddenly is attached to the body that he's driving around. That's the best way I could express it when I touched that prayer rope. It's like this connection between my mind and my actual physical body is made, and they don't feel like dualities anymore. They feel like one thing, right? Where my fingers and my wrist and my sense of touch is all participating in the thoughts and the words that are coming out of my mouth and the thoughts that are in my head. They're all together, because we do a lot of things with our bodies that are involuntary in a sense, like we're not, like, I'm talking with my hands and I'm not planning how I'm going to do that. I'm just doing it. Right. Anyway, what was that, Chad?
That's what cigarettes are. There's a whole there.
That's right.
That's probably why I'm coughing like a bastard. I'd love to stay. I want to listen. I'm looking forward to listening to this tomorrow, guys. I just wanted to drop in and say hello. I'm really glad, Sherry, that you are heading this with the Grail Country on the Grail.
Well, I'm not the only one. There's others who have this ability, and I hope that they take advantage of it, because I feel really inept. Like, seriously, as soon as I clicked go live, everything in my head just fell out onto the floor, and it's like a huge mess.
Sure. I know that feeling, but I know you get told a lot of really great things about you, but the thing is just be secure in the fact that we're not much different, and a lot of us really enjoy just your presence, and clearly we enjoy the things that you have to share. So I wouldn't be too worried about it. Just, keep a prayer rope close to you, and
Yeah. Thanks, Chad.
you got
I think we should vote her off the island, frankly.
Well, I'll be quiet here. I'll listen in. I jumped in because I didn't want you to be alone, Sherry. And then
Thank you.
Tyler was here, one of my favorite people in the whole universe.
Yeah, it's mine
So
too.
I'll just listen in. I might have to drop off to start dinner here, but
yeah. Well, this might be a good a short one, for starters, but it's a start anyways. And for anybody who noticed, I goofed up with figuring out how to do this, so there was all these upcoming Grail countries. But anyway, we managed to make it work. And I'm going to think about how to make it more interesting. And I'm hoping that, people will feel courageous enough to join us, just for an impromptu, because, there's no theme, there's no agenda here. It's just a nice opportunity for our viewers and anybody else who happens to come along who's of good faith and isn't going to bomb the chat with something horrible to participate. So yeah, it's fun, and I'm really grateful, Tyler, that you helped me inaugurate this, because you're the best person for it.
I don't know about best, but I'm certainly grateful to be here.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, we don't have to stop talking now. I just wanted to get that all out.
I wanted to raise one question because I think it was interesting for you, Tyler. Lost Cause wanted to ask. Let me see.
Where is chat? How am I missing this?
I don't know what it looks like for you.
Oh, okay. Oh no, it's under comments. I got it.
So Lost Cause asks, so if you gravitate towards substances that slow you down, because you started off there, what do you do? I know you've thought about this, Tyler.
In terms of not consuming the substances, so not consuming alcohol.
Like if you find yourself that's gravitated towards those slow you downs, like what are the things that you would do otherwise?
Yeah, so it depends. So I think it happens in two different ways. So whenever you have like a field of effect and a cause in one side, you can invert it and find that there's usually the same thing going the other direction. So in other words, if I'm feeling slow, I can overcompensate by speeding myself up. Or I can recognize that being sped up gets me into trouble all the time. So I overcompensate by slowing myself down, even though I do in fact need to be sped up. So it gets complicated. Like you start to invert the polarities. That's why human beings are so ridiculous. Like their self-deception levels are through the roof. They can just get in these endless cycles of just inverting themselves over and over again. And so it's fascinating. So it depends on what the cause is. So it's something like, am I afraid of what I might do or what I have done, and why? Like once you have an answer to that, then you'll have a good understanding about like whether or not and how you should be speeding yourself up. And I don't think that using substances is wrong. Let me make that clear. I don't think that it is wrong. I think in many cases it is wrong. But I don't think it doesn't make any sense to me that God would proliferate our space with this concept. Like even eating good food is a kind of like consciousness altering experience. We just get used to it in different doses.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to excess is of course always very dangerous and should be avoided in almost all circumstances. But people do become traumatized, and sometimes when you're traumatized, you gotta like spit in mud and rub it in your eyes. It gets weird.
Well, I'm one of those weird people that can't ingest things because I don't handle them well. I have an allergy. Right. I also was someone who was unafraid, so I never had a bad trip because I was ready to go wherever it was going to take me, and I think there was something interesting about that. But one of the things Nate always brings up, which is you can see the uses of these in Native American culture or Eastern cultures or whatever, but there's always a shaman that's involved with it. And a shaman from your community, your tribe, your locality that has that recognized connection to the to that spirit realm, whatever it is, and there's a real intentionality for what it's like. It literally was medicine, right, in some ways to guide you through it. And I think that's an aspect that I think I see a lot of people microdosing and some macrodosing and thinking that just doing that in some of these weird ways, it's like inverting it. And I do have a little bit of fear of some of that, but I also have to recognize I've heard tons and tons of people that was the thing that opened them up, that got them to a pathway to a real solid, consistent, lasting spiritual space.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want to it's fascinating how the topic, it evokes very strong responses in people. And in particular, and this is the one that really gets me, from people who have never tried them, right? Which is fascinating, is to be such a strongly held opinion on a substance which seems to alter things so greatly, and yet to have never experienced it yourself.
Well, is that what you described earlier as the conservative?
Yes, that's exactly right. So that there's this extraordinary fear that if you alter what has already been, that you're going to lose what was of value, and that's like absolutely true. It's absolutely true. Unfortunately, if you cling too tightly to what was of value, you prevent new life from participating in it, because new life always messes up. It always messes up, and it's always seeking to remake itself. And so that's when you're too conservative, your children hate you, and they become very progressive very quickly. That's what happens. If you don't allow them to grow into a space and actually feel like their hands are helping build the world, then they become resentful. And then they get used by people in power, Pied Pipers of various sorts, to turn that resentment against the parents, and then becomes this political.
Well, that's also what you described as the wave, that either you're fighting against it, right, or you're flowing with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's what it is, Yep. And that's why I personally don't think that morality doesn't have a voice in these kinds of conversations. Like, morality has no place. It's not a question of whether or not something is morally good or bad, if I dare say.
No, I would say that the only real morality that we have to worry about truly is the ability to discern for ourselves the truth or falsity of
yes,
how we participate with things.
Well, are we standing against the wave, or are we moving with it?
Right.
That's the question that you have to ask yourself, I think.
Yeah, because there are plenty of ways in which other people's strategies at responding to the pressures of life produce behaviors that I would never do. And yet I am not them. And so I can't, if I spend my time judging them, I collect this whole bag of do nots. And then eventually everyone in the world is going to match up with a bunch of do nots that I have. And then I get real crotchety and no one can do anything right. And I'm almost like that at the age of 41. So I can't wait till I'm 80.
Oh, by the time you get to my, well, I won't even say what mine is, but you got a few more years to go. And then after a while, nothing matters anymore. Something like that. You honestly, I don't know, maybe it's just my personality, but I realized this when I had my third child. My first child, everything got written down, everything was measured, everything was noted, everything was, and then by the time I got to my third child, I was like, I don't even have a baby book for her. And half the things that she did, the first things she ever did, I don't remember. It was, and you realize after a while that she's going to be okay. She's going to be fine. Even if she isn't fine, she'll still be fine. Something like that.
Well, we cherish the things that we really love. And like the birth of a child, when it's in the right setting, is an enormously joyful, memorable experience, and we just want to cling to it. I think that's the impetus behind all the baby books and pictures that we take, and the endless parties that we throw.
I am an optimist, Slicarius, just so you know. I'm like a ridiculous optimist. I'm always telling people, just don't fix things, just go with the flow. Everything will be fine. You know.
Is that? Oh, sorry.
No, go.
Is that Nate on Grail Country? Is that?
That's Nate.
Nate, you got gout. I'm sorry. I empathize.
Well, the key is you've got to get to the point to where you have to be willing to go with the flow, but you need to understand everything isn't maybe going to be rosy as you're going with the flow.
Oh no, you're going to wipe out. Yeah, you're going to wipe out.
And that's going to be okay. That's just part of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Well, and you were talking about those natural things when you very first started this. One of the gifts I've been given with, been sober for many years, but one of the gifts I've been able to find is that the natural means to get myself to a center place go so far beyond anything I was trying to do out in that chemical world, even things that were come out of the earth.
Yeah, I agree.
So we can access those things. There was
do you think, Lance, I have a quick question about that. Do you think that has something to do with agency? Because there is a little bit of a lack of agency when it comes to substances, right? Like you can take them, but after that you're taken by them. And when you're using your prayer rope to center yourself, that's actually something that you're doing with your full agency, in a sense, compared to taking substances, right? And there's something deeply empowering, maybe that's not the right word, but there's something very exhilarating about realizing how powerful your own agency can be.
It's hard for me to answer because I have an allergy. And something deep within me knew that I had an allergy. And I knew that it had a grip on me that maybe other people who don't have the same allergy wouldn't feel. So I can only, speak for myself. The other thing that happened to me intuitively in those senses is, like in the garden, I would run and hide. I didn't deny that God existed, but I ran and hid. Not that, and when I'm no longer in the grips of those sorts of things, I come out from hiding and I start walking back towards the source, right? The real source. So that's powerful for me. And it definitely is a losing control. And I think I'm walking away from the center. I'm walking away from, he started talking about too far right, too far left, the yes and the no, and you were talking about these wide expanses. I get so far away from that place that I need to be, right? And it's very scary on the fringes. Like it's scary out there, and basically I would say, I know I don't belong there. Like, I know it's not my home. I mean, those sorts of senses, like, I just know I'm not supposed to be here.
Right.
Well, okay, wait. Hold on. All right.
Just want to welcome Jeremy. Hi, Jeremy.
Welcome, Jeremy.
I didn't actually mean to get into the conversation that quick. I was seeing what that link did.
Okay, then we take it back. You're not welcome.
We like explorers and experimenters in Grail Country.
Yeah.
I did. Well, I don't want to interrupt anything anybody else was saying. I did have some questions about what you were talking about earlier, and in the whole technology transfer, I might have missed what went on from that. About the difference in agency between like spiritual practices and substances.
Yeah.
I did.
All right. Yeah, that's where I was going too. Yeah,
Okay, why don't you say what you were going to say? I was interested in hearing that.
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's and I think that's right, because ultimately what love does is it's calling forth agency. And so I think the only way that real growth actually occurs, or in other words, real growth that also you identify with, which is the I, which is unity, right? It's not an othering, it's not something separate from self, but you're actually identifying with real growth. That only occurs in the state of love. When you use lots of different words, agape, there's lots of nuance that you start to people use in different languages, but it's a calling forth, and that's what parents do. Now, this is the substance thing too, right? So when I'm a little kid, my dad lifts me up and throws me into the air, and for the first time, I'm exposed to a feeling like maybe I felt a couple of times in my mother's womb, right? A sudden jarring, but my stomach flies up into my throat, and the terror fills my entire frame, and I'm flying and I'm flying, and I go so high, and then all of a sudden it stops and I fall back down and he catches me. And there's something so primal about that pattern, which tells me about this. And he keeps doing it higher, right? He goes higher and higher. There's something about this, like, whoa, look about this moreness of this. Look at this greater and greaterness that you can experience in this world, son. Come into it. Look at this amazing stuff you can do. And I'm like, yeah. And I giggle and I laugh, and it doesn't matter how terrifying it is. And if I don't get enough of that, which is the extension of possibility, right? That extending outwards, this thrillingness to the vitality of life. And if I don't get enough of that,
Beautiful.
I'm going to take the drugs that will give me that. Right. And I'll extend that out. And it's just like being lifted by Father and being thrown up into the air. And I think that's what those drugs are supposed to do. They're supposed to reinvigorate the traumatized who never had a father that picked them up and did that, or that rather than pick them up, smash them further down into the ground. And I think these real things have real counterbalances all the time. Now, you can get it internally through weird ways, and that does happen, and people describe it. But I don't think we should limit the routes by which people are reacquainted with the thrill of being. And likewise, on the other side, I think if we become too anxious, if we become unable to soothe ourselves, if our mother never held us in her arms and rocked us back and forth, and we never really learned from an early age how it is that we could be held by the world and loved by it no matter what happens, then we turn to things like alcohol, and we try to depress, and we try to remove the existence of the bad. And that, so again, it's this weird thing of needing to say more yeses or wanting to say more nos. It's like, no, memory, no. Or yes. That's whatever that is. It's a kind of compensation.
It's again that friction that Nate was pointing out between the yes and the no, right?
Yeah, well, it's some kind of compensation for not being satisfied for what you presently are.
Yeah.
And that what not being satisfied with what you presently are is really strange, because sometimes it's because you regret what you once were, like things that you did in the past. And sometimes it's just a deep sense that you're not living up to your potential, right? So that you've become something you shouldn't have, or that you're not becoming something that you should be. And depending on which one of those you are, like those are compensations. Like, do I need more of something, or do I need less of something? I would thou art either hot or cold, but because thou art lukewarm, I will spew thee out of my mouth. You just can't sit in that neutral space. It's so boring. Like, we got kicked out of the garden for a reason. So it's more treacherous out here, but
Well, and the magic happens. I've been very blessed that I've been able to get to that still place. I'm starting to be able to tap into that more now than I ever had in my life, where I can have those explosive feelings in stillness.
Subtlety, yeah. Well, so this is okay, yeah, but what about orgasm? Okay, what about the reality of this? What about like the thrill of diving off a high board into the water below? Like all these things that we do as children that are just natural expressions of this truly thrilling experience that does start to deaden down. Why does it deaden down? I don't know why. Like, but I can feel it in myself too, even though it's still quite strong within me. but this tendency to play with the world and that feeling, it starts to change, it transform. And so this really does start to create a wisdom within me that I feel is appropriate to myself, but is becoming more and more at odds with the appropriateness of childhood. It's very interesting, this tension that it begins to build between myself and my children.
Yeah,
like,
you know, Douglas Harding has this great video about the 4 stages of life. If anybody wants to find it, it's easy. Douglas Harding, 4 stages of life. Highly recommend it. And he talks about the reintegration of the child into the you know, the person who's aged, right? And he calls that the 4th stage, which is the sage. And the third, I think it's the 3rd stage. Yes. So it's baby, toddler, teenager, and sage. Those are his 4 stages. And the 3rd stage is the teenager. And I love what he says about that. He says that, you know, well, I have to go back. So he says, when you're a baby, you don't know where your body, where your mother's body ends and yours begins, right? So that's your experience of the world, and everything is about you, basically. It's, you know, it's your world is very egocentric because all your needs need to be met. The toddler is in this quasi full original participation where this is why little kids can be superheroes, right? Because they really believe that they are the thing that they're thinking about. So, you know, he's out in the world. He is the tree. He is the beach. He is the grass. He is the sandbox. He is the kitty. He's everything that he sees, and he's fully participating in it. And then the teenager, and one day the mother says to the toddler, look, Johnny, there's you in the mirror. That's you, you know. And Douglas Harding puts it in these terms. He says that the toddler looks in the mirror and he goes, okay, just to satisfy his mother, right? But he doesn't grasp it. It's not real to him. Because when he's outside, he doesn't see the mirror. He doesn't see himself anymore. And he's the whole cosmos. And then the teenager is confronted with the mirror. And the beautiful thing, the way, if I can remember this right, actually, you know what? I think I have it written down here because it's just, Harding says that when the teenager looks in the mirror, damn it. Sorry, guys. I have to find it. Here it is. They say, I am what I look like. And that, he says, is hell in the end. I am what I look like is hell. You can't live from that. What I look like is dying, and what I am isn't. And he, you know, he says that's where the teenager, that's where most people stay. They stay in that space. But what we need to do is we need to integrate that child again, right? And when that happens, we become the sage. Because, well, he doesn't say this, but the way that I think about it is that, and I don't like to use the word re-enchantment, but I guess from a perfectly subjective point of view, it is a re-enchantment of the world. But I think the world is enchantment or is enchanted, right? So, but the wonder that you had as a child, the full participation in the cosmos that you experienced as a child, it's now married to all of those sensory experiences that you've had, right? And then that's where the sense making actually can begin. Let me just put it in those terms.
It's when our wills are at one, right? So to speak more to what Jeremy was pointing to.
Yeah, and one of the things that
What you mean?
One of the things
Well,
I was thinking about was
sorry.
with the yes or with the yes or the no, right? Because one of the things is as we get older, we say no to a lot of childlike things that we should still embrace because I'm too old for that, or I can't do, we get, and so that whole yes, no paradigm, like you need to embrace that childlikeness, but not be childish, right? And so trying to get that center of opening yourself up to the proper yeses and nos and to allow yourself to be childlike is really hard. Like the world beats that out of you. And there's lots of different things telling you and trying to get to that place that you're talking about to where and say yes to the adventure at 60 years old, right? We need the what you're telling, like you're talking about, we need the exhilaration,
Yeah.
But
Like I was talking to Jess about this. He quoted the verse, when I was a child, I spoke as a child, but now, that verse. How does the rest of it go, Lance? When I was a child, I spoke as a child.
But when I became a man, I put away childish things.
Right. Okay. So, and I said, well, what if you thought about it in this way? When I was a caterpillar, I spoke as a caterpillar, right? But now that I'm a butterfly, and the thing that I love about the caterpillar and the butterfly is that the question that I ask myself is, did the caterpillar die? And he did not die, right? He was integrated into the butterfly. The butterfly is the caterpillar, and the caterpillar is the butterfly. And yet they both have completely different, they both come from completely different places, right? Like the caterpillar doesn't know what it means to fly.
Or does it?
Well, no, I don't think he does. And he's species specific. He's on his little plant. He thinks that's the whole world, right? And
But does he? But you don't think he carries a memory of being a butterfly?
He hasn't become one yet.
He came from one. And the monarchs, which are amassing outside of my house here on their annual seasonal journey from Canada down to Mexico, they transgenerationally show up in the same breeding grounds. So monarchs will travel from north to south and wind up where their parents had them without ever having been there. So
Sure.
Yeah, there's a deep memory in us. I'm
Well,
curious.
I don't know. There's I've been talking about this recently, and oh, good, Nate's here. Nate, hello.
Well, with Nate coming in, I'm going to drop off. We'll tag team. I'll be listening to you guys while.
Yeah, I know you're trying to make dinner.
It's spaghetti night tonight.
Okay, love you. Bye, Lance.
Delicious.
Love you guys.
Thrilling, even.
Yeah. Well, okay. Here's a thought for you, Tyler. I don't know how. I'm trying to think of how I put this the other day. So,
all right. Wait. Hold on. Give me 30 seconds. Gather your thoughts. I need to child duty real quick.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. How's it looking on your end, Nate?
You've been doing. I mean, I was following while I was reviewing emails for work and listening. I thought this conversation was great. It sounded great. It's an honor to have Tyler on the channel.
Yes.
He's just such a great guy and a wise person. So I was glad to hear his voice. I thought there was it was very the conversation was very us.
I know, right?
I think we've already validated Paul's thesis that if more channels started doing these kinds of live streams, we would end up with a very wide variety of different kinds of conversations.
Right. That's the whole premise of
so
Piranesi, right? My father's house has many rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I just kind of stopped by to say hi for a little bit. As you know, I'm not feeling well today, but I'll at least talk for a bit.
That's great.
Until Tyler gets back.
Yeah. So, maybe when Tyler gets back, can you elaborate on the friction of the yes and no? And because I know, I know that, and like my brain isn't working very well, Nate, right now because I'm really.
Oh, don't worry about it. You know, actually,
I
I think
this thing.
Do you remember what I was saying earlier today about gnomic will?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a connection, right? Because the gnomic will
that is the gnomic will.
Right. It's the deliberative capacity.
Yeah.
But remember how I was talking about, like, I wanted to try to affirm what Joseph was saying about God choosing, but God's choosing doesn't happen deliberatively. It's always a positive choice.
Yes.
It's always a choice for the good. It's always a choice. It's always an affirmation. It's always a yes. There's no vacillation with between the yes and the no with God.
Right.
That's the result of our falling into duality. So Tomberg, he ties that to this principle of electricity that is generated from the friction between the yes and the no in the closed world of the serpent. Right. And it's that vacillation between the yes and the no that keeps it closed and not open to Sabbath.
Right.
So yeah, and that sounded to me like very much what Tyler was saying, like just intuitively grasped.
Yeah.
So I thought that was great.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, sorry. It's great to see you, Nate. I'll be present in just a second.
No problem.
No problem. Oh, we got Luke in the chat. He should hop in here.
Yeah, Luke, he should hop in here.
He should just hop in here.
Come on, Luke.
What else is
can do it.
Looks like Phil is here. Hey, Phil.
Yeah.
He's a fellow Canadian. Do you know Phil?
I do.
Okay.
I know him from the Discord. And
gotcha.
As a fellow Canadian. Yeah.
I know him from the estuary leader training.
Okay.
He was one of the people who volunteered to do the model online estuary that I did with Graham.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah, about so maybe we could just hash this out a bit, because what does this vacillation, so the vacillation between yes and no generates electricity. So what does what is this electricity doing? Closing the circle?
Well, it's kind of like it's driving it's driving automatic. Remember how Tomberg talks about the different levels of memory?
Yeah.
I think it's what drives the automatic memory.
Okay.
So, which is the things that we do by default. Remember how we suggest that the only free actions available to us are those things that break us out of that default automatic mode that we're in as a result of the fall. So
right.
So doing something like loving your enemies is one of the only true free actions available to you. Whereas loving your friends and hating your enemies just happens automatically.
Paradox. Yes. Paradox is the essence of choice. Real choice. Real will. This is a way to say it, I think.
Real will. Right.
Right. Will is because what happens is when your paradox is a state in which one or the other has to exist. If one exists, the other can't, which is a decision. That's what we call a decision, right?
Right.
So that's will. That's the act of will. So this is what's interesting about the body then. So then the body, and this is how I think of it, ultimately, we give it this form, this shape via the senses, but in reality, it is that incredibly complicated structure which exists between a field of infinite yes, which is juxtaposed against a field of infinite no.
Right.
That's what's happening. So space that is filled is like a no. It's like a bit, which is 0 or 1, right?
It's almost you can compare that the no to the nihil, out of which we are called, right?
No, I think that's the yes. I think that's the yes, actually. Okay, so let me elaborate then. So a filled space is already existing, so it's already become a yes, right? And so if I wanted to occupy that space, so if I wanted to be within that same space, it's a no, right? Because I can't. Can I be that in that space? No, that's the answer. No, it doesn't matter I can't be. In order to occupy that space, I'd have to change it and be something else. And so that is like the already present no. So everything that I am right now is a kind of no to that which could be. And anything that becomes is this yes, which is transforming the no. And that's that. So this is why children are this overabundance of yes.
Mm-hmm.
The purity of their conscious experience, that and I you can actually measure this. This is what I think. This is something you can actually measure scientifically, perhaps. And this is probably way outside the purview of this discussion. But topologically, you can define the interface structure of the total domain, which is representational of the outward experience within this container here. It has some actual structure, the edges of which, the boundaries of which are at the quantum domain. Now, this is out of Penrose and Hameroff's work. But that's an actual structure which has a shape which is then defined by bosonic energy, right? Which is this yes and a no, electromagnetic field fluctuations, right? It's an alternation of yes and no. And what we seem to be doing as conscious creatures is, again, it's just leaning into a polarity of either like adjusting in these minute fashions in some strange, overly complicated Rube Goldberg machine from the interface of the quantum domain of infinite yes, like how to maneuver in this space of already present no's. It's really like that's what seems to be going on. And that co-creation and the possibility of it, it's like it's learning how to say yes to the no. Right? That's what it's like. Caring for the world as it exists is learning how to say yes to that no. It's not me. I can't.
Yeah, I think
space.
Well, I think like this is what when Maximus says that incarnation is creation, that's what he's talking about. Because I think like that's what's hypostatically joined in Christ.
Yeah.
So that those things,
marriage.
So those two incommensurate things come into union. So Christ himself is a coincidence of opposites.
Yeah, the Hyros Gamos, right? That's it, the divine marriage. Because what we're actually talking about is that interface. It's where those two like yin yang, like immiscible fluids meet, right? And like where they build out this very complicated, interesting structure I call a body.
Well, this is what I think of when I say something like the thing that ails you is what's making you whole.
Yes.
Right.
And that seems to me, when I really introspect, that really does seem to be like what drives me subconsciously or unconsciously. I find myself continuously confronted by things that are like in remembrance to something I'm needing to like be aware of or become aware of and like awaken to. It's fascinating. Like, and I can miss it. Like I can miss it paying attention to other things. And that's the subtlety, I think, that you miss out on when you're in the thrill that Lance is avoiding, right? Like that's why beyond a certain point to engage in that reduces your capacity to participate in the subtlety and the nuance of that. And that's what I think is that's that weird, difficult transition. It's very Alice in Wonderland, because as I age and as I attune myself to this greater and greater subtlety, wisdom, whatever you want to call it, it's less and less relevant to the eternal yes of my children. And yet, like, I have to somehow recapture that continuously, as you were alluding to, like folding the child back in.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I seem to decay inside, right? Like,
yeah, because you are not what you look like, right? What you look like is dying, and that is not what you are.
Right, and what I look like is that which was built by my actions.
I just wanted to say something to one of the comments here really quick. We have Runaway Rascal says, to that point, there's also something about the indwelling of the Spirit being integral to creation as well. And I would say yes, which is why St. Maximus says he is Pentecost of Christ.
He is Pentecost.
Yes.
Maxwell is Pentecost.
Maximus.
No, Maximus says of Christ, he is Pentecost. which
Christ
is what
Pentecost.
right. And if I don't know if you saw the conversation between Jason Baxter and Mark Vernon or not, but Jason Baxter was saying something interesting about what he thought about what Barfield reminding C.S. Lewis because of his desire to have a temperate view toward mysticism. What he said, Barfield said to him is, "You're forgetting Pentecost, Jack." Like that was what Barfield actually said to Lewis.
Okay, so can you elaborate on that, on what you mean by he is Pentecost? He is the indwelling of the Spirit? Is that what you mean?
Well, okay. So our entire our experience of the entire Trinity is dependent upon its revelation in the person of Christ. And the indwelling of the Spirit is the repetition of what happens in the divine hypostasis of the Son in us. So that mode of being that hypostatically joins created and uncreated is repeated in us. That's what that means when he says. That's why he says he is Pentecost. It's the is of Christ that joins two things which should not be able to be joined.
I'm thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
I mean,
Well,
yeah.
an amusing image comes to mind. You know, like when Peter Pan is like flying around chasing the shadow, and he's got to like rub soap on it to get it to stick. There's something really interesting.
That's great because Sherry's shorthand for understanding the idea of hypostasis is glue. And Maximus uses as a way of understanding what happens in Christ. He actually talks about the way body and soul are united together.
Right,
as a way of understanding it. So
yeah,
so that's very much so that's an appropriate image, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so so what it seems to me, all right, so that's always already occurred in the sacrifice of Christ. This is what it seems like to me, and the only place where that can occur is in the eternal now, which is in acceptance.
Right.
So like right now, that has already occurred, so to speak.
Yeah, it's always already happening.
Yeah, and so I only participate in that by accepting it, and that's taking the Lord's name upon me, right? That is the only true real acceptance that it is. And so what you're doing is you're like, that is the baptism of the fire, I think, and is another way to describe it. That is Pentecostal in the sense.
Well, that's also the meaning of the name. That's also what I mean, like in the bit of biblical idiom of naming, like that's what it's talking about, because name is a symbol of unity in the way the Bible talks about naming, which joins it to this idea of hypostatic identity.
Mm-hmm. And so what you're saying is, it's in a strange way, yes, this was necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And that's forgiveness. Right.
Yeah.
And so you're settling into a no, it could not have been otherwise.
Yeah, otherwise we wouldn't have a history. We would have no history.
Right,
which means we wouldn't actually exist.
Right.
We would be.
Which is why it's quite clear that when you're not possessed by the Spirit of Christ and you're possessed by the spirit of Antichrist, it is poisonous and it seeks to end life.
Correct. Yeah. Very good.
Yeah, and then you said earlier today, Nate, something about creation of the cosmos being, well, the way that I think about it is like redemption began at creation.
Yeah.
Right? Like that the whole
yeah, well, look back at the conversation we had on ML Bach's The Apocalypse of John, right? When he talks about Revelation 4 and 5, and Bach reads Revelation 4 and 5 as a New Testament version of Genesis, and I think that's precisely right. And Revelation tells you, and it textually self-references, it has the vision in Revelations in 4 and 5, and then later on within the same text, it tells you when the Lamb was slain. It was before the foundation of the world.
Yes. Yeah.
That's when the Lamb was slain, before the foundation of the world. And the book that the divine council worries cannot be open is the book of providence. It's the book of destiny. It's the book of our history that is yet to unfold.
Okay, so Upcycle Club says we would be ahistoric. What does ahistoric mean?
Without a history.
Without a history. Would that be
No, prehistoric is just before we recorded history. Ahistoric would be
No, I'm thinking pre-existent.
And you can't be a person without a history. Like, how are you a person if you have no history?
Yeah.
Well, okay, all right. Well, that's a great
We're
question.
going.
Okay, so then I guess personhood is like strong emergence or something. Like, what if the development of a soul? What is this? That's it. Yeah. Whew.
Oh, slack. God bless you.
I don't know. See, this is what I keep getting stuck at. All these questions about, so we do so much abstracting and hypothesizing and hypotheticalizing all the time about other states rather than dealing with the present here and now.
And it tells you everything about the past and the future, actually. If you
Which part? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, if you get into the whole idea of your body and the problem that it presents you in this world of thorns that we live in, right? The piercing. You can actually understand what the incarnation is. I mean, you can for me anyways, it helps if I think about my right now and that which I how did you put that earlier? Saying yes to the no, right? That's how you put it.
But isn't that what the incarnation is?
That's right. So like it's not like, okay, if you say yes to the no, then everything will be nice and you'll have a good life. No, that's not what it means.
Crucified.
It means now you will become a person. That's to me how I see it. When I learn to say yes to the no,
behold the man.
Then I've learned to become a human being, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Well, a person. I think is a person. Yes, that's what I. Yes.
Or
right.
I think when I say human being, I think of the true human being, like my.
No. The true part is it. That's exactly right. But it's something more like it's a deep recognition that you have not yet become the true. What it is you need to become.
Right. And this is, I think, Tyler. This is, I think, what it means when it says that Christ is made perfect through his suffering, right? Because this body that we live in suffers, right? And he took on a body in that he would, because he suffered, right? And was made perfect through his suffering. And I'm not saying that he wasn't perfect, but what I'm saying is that John Bear makes this point. It's not coming out of my head or anything. It's thanks to him. Like he said, Pilate looked at Christ and said, "Ecce homo," right? This is a true human being, right?
Mm-hmm. Behold the man. That's what I was referencing.
Right. Someone who is made perfect through their suffering, who voluntarily moves towards this, says yes to the no. Okay. That's what Mary did when she said, "Let it be unto me," right? Everything about that was a no, right? And she said yes to it.
Well, right. This is why I wanted to. This is why my instinct was early on when we first started talking about this. My instinct was intuitively I wanted to link the idea of the no to the potency. I think Tyler started talking about it in terms of potency, which is right, but it's also in a way that's like non-being too. The potency is non-being because it hasn't come yet. It hasn't yet come to be. Becoming perhaps is the better way of thinking of it. But to me, it intuitively, it is associated with the no. And it's the yes God's yes is trying to join with it to create something that is I don't know if I want to say beyond it, but the perfect union of it. The coincidence of opposites is the best way that I can put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the reconciliation of all things.
Well,
This is
Christ, the mystery of Christ is the best way that I can put it.
Yeah.
But
Which is just the mystery of creation. And that is ultimately
Yes.
what it comes down to, because
yes.
We come from yes, right? To come from something is to come from a state of being. So you can't come from no, right? That's why I think it's in the yes. So you come from yes, whatever this trajectory of being is, it's coming from yes. It's coming into being. And the only reason it does that is because it's moving towards, it's teleological, right? It's that potency, it's that potential part. And that motion only occurs because of that pre-existing history, right? Which is the other side of that like weird Oreo sandwich of like past, present, and future, where the bodies, I know it's just, yeah, it's just can only be described as that, like the thing which is interfacing between memory and possibility. So there are like two kinds of perfection, right? Because there's two kinds of zeros and two kinds of absolutes for each space, right? The infinite absolute of yes, which is like pure potential, which is no structure, no nothing, and then like the infinite of no, which is like pure actuality, pure all, like it's a crystalline structure. You can think it's like a infinite dimensional.
Oh, that's so interesting that you
So
just
you see
said
the
that.
no as the limit. So that would be more. You see the no as the limit.
Well, it's composed of a field
Mhm.
of, you can think of it like that. It's composed of a field. So it's two infinitely fine substances intermixing.
Mhm.
And there's a third substance, which is neither of the two, which mediates between them.
Okay, so
Well, except for I would say that mediation is precisely not a substance. It's not a tertium quid at all.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
like it's a
using lots of-
positive. It's a positive. It's just it's a pure positivity that is it's a nothingness, which is
Yeah, right.
which is
Yeah.
what we call hypostasis. Really, that's
Okay.
that's what that is.
Yeah, words utterly fail me.
Which brings us back to person, because person really
yeah.
is the ground.
yes.
Well, personhood, so this is why it's distinction, because personhood is that which could not be otherwise. So it's that which was actually created, right? And so it is, that's why, so like the true person is, so there's a strong sense, and this is the strangeness of it. There's this strong sense of needing to distinguish from that which is around me, because there's an evil that creeps in over time. This evil of corruption, like whatever that is, it's too fixed in its way, and it isn't adapting, it isn't changing, and that needs renewal. So okay, but to get to that point, you have to have this like continuously refreshed answer to the question of why.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Why?
Which is what the toddler says.
It's exactly right. We just why, and at some point, someone gets really pissed off with us, and we stop asking it so much out loud. But it doesn't ever really stop. I think it sinks down into our body, and the body just keeps asking it over and over. Why?
I've never stopped asking it out loud.
Yeah, well,
I'm just like a perpetual child.
Oh, you? Yeah, I was half expecting a Job reference too.
Well,
at this point,
right. But unless you become as little children, you cannot enter into the kingdom of heaven. And I think what that means is that beyond a certain point of corruption, the only way to put on incorruptibility is the renewal. It's that baptismal effort, which is like you're simultaneously accepting that which has been so that something new can unfold. Right, but the moment you spend all that time resisting that which has already been, is that you're stuck in this loop of hell. It's like oh, it's just the most awful feeling. You get stuck. You just, all you're doing is observing the horribleness of what has happened. That's what people describe as PTSD or general anxiety. There's all sorts of things. It's, whatever it is we've experienced in this world that we never want to have happen again, we actually make it happen again in our heads over and over and over again. And that is hell. That's so awful. Why? But we do it. And so, all right. So then that keeps happening over and over and over again. And so then you get stuck in the loop, and that's the corruption. It's not updating. It's not changing and transforming. And so it's disconnected from the eternity, that eternal progression which occurs. And so I notice that's happening. And then to be a person, there's a real subtle felt sense of distinguishing from that which is around me. It's like becoming distinguished. It's becoming different. And I think whatever that sense of nobility is, of like rising above, it's like it's imbuing one's sense of personhood with a kind of risingness. It winds up being a kind of class dynamic thing. And that's the way we use it in language, depending on like what side of the fence we happen to feel we're on. But I do think it is that inner felt sense of like rising up above those around you. They're doing things that are somehow behaviors which you no longer subscribe to, that they're seen as like, well, beneath you, right? Like truly beneath you in a sense that if you were to engage with them, it would be
something that would harm your own integrity.
Yeah, your own, well, and right, and the subtlety that you've developed in the way that you manipulate things. So in the sense that Lance has developed this subtlety and the way that he's going to go eat that spaghetti and really enjoy the hell out of it, right? That's a great phrase. Enjoy the hell out of it so that it becomes heaven. And then if he were to engage in some other method of like overblowing that sense, then he would lose out on all that structure that he's created over time.
Okay, I want to answer this really quick because I think I have the answer. So if childish wonder is the key, why keep seeking answers in books and the writings of long dead when you could just go experience this world directly instead?
You're reading the wrong books. That's what I would say.
I would say, what is this?
Yeah, for me, this is exactly what Harding gets at when he says that you have to marry the two, right? The wisdom.
Right. The sage has the same. The sage is just like the child. Like that's where.
Well, the sage marries the child to the
right.
long dead, and the wisdom, right, that exists.
Right.
That's what the sage does. So that's.
Well, and actually, and the sage is wise enough to know that he can't just go back to being the child, but he has to come back to that state through a different path.
But like he says about the teenager believes that what he's looking at in the mirror is what he is. And that's hell. Okay? Because see, the toddler goes out into the world and he isn't what he looks at in the mirror. Okay? He is the whole world.
Right.
And the teenager, the way Harding describes it in the video, the teenager is suddenly confronted, right? It's right here. It's in the teenager.
Well, they're hyper obsessed with identity.
Right. And what it's
who am I in the world?
Is saying to them is you are what you look like. And Harding says, no, that's not true. That's hell. Right. And the sage marries both the child who believes that he is the cosmos and his own experience, right? He marries those two together, and that's
through learned ignorance. Like that's the so the child's that's the difference between the sage and the child is that the child has a natural naivete, right? Just doesn't know anything.
There is that, but George MacDonald makes a really.
But the sage has a learned ignorance, which is right. A letting go.
That's right. Yeah, he says yes to the no.
That's time for your flowers. That's cue up the flower story because that's your flower story, Sherry.
That's my flower story.
Yeah.
That's it. I throw them. Oh, I say, oh, darling. And I throw them and I live them.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that's what that is. That's that.
And the oh, darling is the really cool part of that story.
Because
you love them, right? This is the saying yes to the no.
Yeah.
Right. You say, "Oh, darling," and I throw them and I live them. And that is like the most courageous thing I have ever heard anyone say. Because
Okay.
it
All right.
really-
This is so beautiful. And all right. So, and I have to go in just a few minutes.
I
right
have
now.
to
problem.
too.
This has been very enjoyable. Thank you.
Yeah. We have to do it again, Tyler.
Tyler,
Yeah.
we haven't had a chance to talk enough. Every time I talk to you, it's amazing.
Yeah. I'd love to come back to you. All right. So Groundhog Day, right?
Mm.
So you know this movie, Groundhog Day, Bill Murray. Okay, it's such a great movie. It's metaphorically.
It's the best movie. Like I watched it recently and I was blown away by it. I was like, "Oh my God, I never saw this before."
Oh, really? Oh, yeah.
So
And, you know, I just want to say one little thing about it that I noticed was that it was the feminine that transformed him.
Yes, exactly. Right. So what happened was he got, well, and all right, hold on. Okay, sorry for the interruption. Okay, so what happened was he got rejected by her. And all he could do for that entire time was try to figure out how to win her over.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So he was rejecting the rejection. But the moment he accepted the rejection and just went about doing good, she fell in love with him, and that's when the loop of hell stopped and everything changed and it became real again.
Beautiful.
All right, I've got to go.
Okay.
This has been beautiful. It's
been wonderful. Really I'm sure we'll have another one soon.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone who watched. Appreciate everybody.
Yeah.
Sherry, thanks for making this happen.
Well, I was scared to death, but here I am.
You did great. You did great. Thank you very much.
The other side of fear is a beautiful place.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, everybody have a good night and a good supper and whatever you're doing.
Yep.
Bye.